Good starting point. So welcome back to the conversation, you guys. We are stoked to have you here. Let's see if we can, I guess. Sorry, I'm a very awkward person, so we'll make through it together. All right. I just also wanted to say that I'm excited to be here. I'm super excited that everybody else is here. I'm a super nerd, and I get goosebumps whenever we talk about bringing people back to the table. Hopefully we have conversations while we're in our cafe tables. And I think this portion now, hopefully we've generated a burning panelists on. So we're going to just kind of work through our tables, and we'll have each table give a towards the panelists, and we'll just kind of work our way through. I think we're just going to start with this table. Going to kind of snake our way through the table.
Can I make a quick note on microphones, just because we're all going to be holding them now. If you can hold them pretty close to your mouth, it'll just you can hear it better.
Keith, are you the spokesperson?
Not the spokesperson.
Are you the speaker?
I'm a.
Okay, John.
Right, so hopefully we comment any kind of idea that you had that you wanted to share with the panelists, kind of previous to the cafe. We want to give a tidbit of what your group, substantial information you got from.
So I'll try to our conversation and translate. That participatory production is a tool, and it is one of many available to us. And as a tool, there's an opportunity to use it in new ways. There's also the potential to reuse existing structures, whether that's who participates or how decisions are made. And so I suppose the question is that true with your or any reflections on
That's a great question. I think it's really a wide variety of, and because we as young people, there are a lot of innovative ideas that come up. I think the danger is that young people sometimes aren't always aware of the technical constraints on projects of rather than might be more traditional. Something.
Mentioned it as being a tool, and with our when you're participating in PB processes, who are being the actors in the room, and who about if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That's an important thing because you can be the agendas that people are trying to force when it comes to what they want out of certain processes. So understand what impact are you having and what intent do you bring with
that? So just to echo something that Jess said, I think this is crucial. It's thinking about the recruitment stage of participants. So if there's an open call for participants for sort of for an initial body to identify what types of from different types of groups is it possible to identify them and then to actively go out and ensure that you have representation from the group? It's really sort of one of the key ways you can sort of avoid this being dominated sort of either, or that it just for the mayor's office or a city council member. So I think that innovation is really there, and then what can they do to make their use and build their communities?
And what I'd add to that from a implementer, practitioner standpoint is to be accountable and transparent. So that's everything from transparency within each of the programmatic phases. So say, we're at the end of voting and we clearly see which projects the people wanted, but for some reason it doesn't go through. It is important that we as practitioners maintain a level of responsiveness to the people who voted. Anything like that should be able to be implemented. That's the standard that we hold in the that cannot be executed. Like in the communities of color developing metrics, that we must be accountable for metrics. The onus is on us to analyze and how we can align ourselves with what the city, what folks.
So I think that's a really important question, innovation. But I think also is just remember to have fun with it. Keep it engaging, keep it alive. We don't have to participatory democracy. There's participatory. All these different aspects of participatory democracy that you kind of go around to find new innovative ways to bring. Important question. That's something we need to keep in focus when we move. And we'll go to the table right behind.
You're it.
Great, thank you. I think this is a question pertains to implementation. So maybe Amy might be the best person to respond. You guys have an answer, please. Or present policy table or to that decision-making power, but that it also needs. So my question is, how might we implement something like participatory budgeting in a policy environment that's more conservative than Portland? Vehicle to represent the interests of members who are not typically given a seat at the table of a participatory institution that serves to perpetuate status quo interests. Thank you.
Great question, and it really goes back to rhetoric and the language that we use can be very polarizing. On the face of it, participatory budgeting for democracy is very bipartisan, right? In Seattle, with such similar to Portland, it's kind of that like progressive assumption that everybody's progressive. And what we're really talking about when we say budgeting is there's actually also a lot of fiscal pragmatism within it as well. So what I would say is playing up and using the language of democracy serves everyone. Democracy serves Democrats. Engage citizens who exponential amounts of overall good, right? And then the other piece of it is, and to play back on that, play up the fiscal conservatism, is we all need to learn good financial practices. That's very bipartisan. So that when you are pitching it in an environment where there's one way to talk about participatory democracy as very progressive and giving power to, you can frame it as this is really take ownership over our finances. And that also looks like how do you curb, we're talking about value, curbing spending in one to another. This is the discourse that you to change if you feel like, hey, children don't need that many playgrounds. That's a very extreme example, but I'm saying that there's a possibility to talk about resources within a less, this is progressive for all of us.
Folks, I'm looking at our time right now, and we are going to have to start cruising through this, so we're just going to get to one answer per question. Funnel through because I want to hear everyone get a chance to speak. So we'll pass our mic. Let's go back one, and then we'll come our way over, and then kind of snake it.
Question, just a question from the table? Comment? Would you like to pass? Because that's really okay. Okay. Because time is a bit of an issue for us right now. How about this table?
All right, so we had, so I guess we'll stick with one. But when we were talking about our concerns and different ideas, the issue of equity just continued to pop up through our discussion. And initially, our very first question was, how do you get people to the table that really need to be there? I know that we've talked about it a little bit, but just looking at some of the results that were shown through the presentations, it's clear that there's still an issue of getting certain types of people or demographics to be able to participate. So a very large and maybe loaded question, but just some ideas and thoughts on how we can really truly make it equitable for everybody.
So I think there's two. One of the ones that I mentioned earlier, and that's around the issue of recruitment, sort of identifying, making it's a really time-intensive, based on interpersonal relationships, where you try to draw people in. Way is through program design, and through program design, you can do it in program design. One way is to create more resources underserviced neighborhoods. Area is that a program could focus on a policy area that is a fundamental. For example, just drawing from they did they focused on public security. Is that poor neighborhoods were trying to get in to help aid the police, right? So you can sort of areas of crime. As an equity issue, you can say, okay, these are that are of more concern, and so therefore the rules will be. One of the biggest problems, I think, sort of going back to this equity issue, is to set up institutions because those a lot of key security tends to be just Northeast or North Portland.
Thank you, Brian. That was a good answer. Work our way down. Yeah, let's go down and then kind of, since the way the table's.
Go.
Thanks. So we were the Spanish group. I feel like we focus on the Hispanic community. And out of all the questions we have, the one that is burning in my mind is there's a lot of from our communities to the government, whether it's because of where we grew up or our current political climate. So do you have any suggestions on how we could build more trust in the process to what we're trying to achieve?
this is going to be an unsatisfying response. But what I'm going to say is it has to come from trusted voices, right? Like you guys are the leaders. Right? I'll say this from my own experience of being a first-generation Vietnamese woman, is if someone is coming to speak to me from an outside perspective that doesn't know the Vietnamese community, what we should do, I'm going to be immediately very walls up. But I think that the Latino communities, that y'all the leaders, y'all know the answers, and it's actually the onus of the status quo to create space to create that, right? But I don't think that anybody tell communities of color what the solutions are, because I think communities of color have the answer.
So our table talked about like in the reality when a lot of our local jurisdictions are needing to have what crucial programs to cut. And so curious about your thoughts on how we make the case for PB to be sustained when a lot of our local governments are just trying to figure out what we have to close or what community center do we have to close to balance the budget. And if you see or no examples of using the PB process, not just to have community-driven decisions on programs, potentially having community also be part of those conversations of what to cut when that's the reality of where a jurisdiction is at in its budget.
That's a great question. Of what I wanted to, I didn't go enough into the presentation. The question of why Youth Voice, Youth Choice transformed choice was, we started as 700,000 because it was a pilot that a former council member was really passionate and championed with our former mayor. And after there was no more money, time spending. But we knew as a city that we didn't want to give up on participatory budgeting, which means so we created Your Voice, Your Choice in part, an existing program called the Neighborhood Parks and Street, which for decades had been already money earmarked for park and street improvements within neighborhoods. Now, we took that program and that earmarked capital funding and added the participatory budgeting framework on it because, frankly, we needed to be creative. And it's a very pragmatic move, and I say that when you are in a government place, and there was no way that the city council was going to give us more money for something, create new buckets of money, look at where there's already and try to apply this process upon it. And I guarantee, especially the way that our cities and our counties are structured, capital funding is one of those secured buckets always can work. The difficulty with human services, unrestricted dollars in the general fund, is it's harder to make the case to politicians to invest make investments that are one time rather than a sustainable, what is the return?
If I could just add on really quick, I think sort of a efficiency argument. You can make the argument that resources are going to be spent more efficiently because they're more tied in. So it's moving beyond sort of what elected officials in Silva necessary and sort of making a better use of it. The second one is a legitimacy issue. And this is where you begin to see governments doing this in times of crisis, shifting money around on the basis of the number of people and their forms of engagement. Just to give you one brief example, basically they were facing a cross where to cut and how to cut resources. The thing to ask citizens to do, came up with this process of, and I think you should do is we should do a short, and then this citizen, when the creators thought it was going to happen, but it's what it ended up coming out of the process.
So our group wondered what kind of tools and what kind of messages you suggest with leaders to reduce the amount of resistance or concern that they have. How do you mitigate feel in sort of turning over these kinds of decisions to folks that are not elected?
Sorry, can you repeat the last on that?
So, yeah, how do you mitigate concern that elected officials have in turning over ostensibly their job to non-elected folks?
Well, I think it starts, the way they got there was through us basically listen to their constituency, and also they have the task of carrying that out. So understanding as an official to kind of sidestep the opinions of also understanding the demands. So I think that's something that parties concerning people's role, but what can the constituency provide in terms of communication? And I think that's key in terms of kind of relaying between a constituent and.
And I'm going to quickly add, Bernie, it might be a matter of relationship. There's not sort of, I have more power to bring it in a truly, possibly that's for elected officials. Comment?
Ooh, that's loud. The question that kind of rose to the top that hasn't really been asked yet at this table was, how do you measure success?
So I'll start. So that's a great question. I think for the participatory budgeting program, it was really about how get involved and from what communities they were taking into account of what school districts, how whether they ideas initially and or whether throughout the whole process and ended up voting, and the diversity of projects that or were they cases and for a variety of causes that were in need. So yeah, those were the main factors, I would say.
Jump in here because this question is a great question. It's at the fundamental heart of both the academic and policy debates. Like the question, the way that I sort of reframe it a little bit is, these programs matter. Is it worthwhile? And that's worthwhile people spending their time on these programs. And then, so I think one of the ways you could approach this is to start with the so what question around what is that program trying to accomplish? Is it trying to build community? Is it trying to improve governance? Is it trying to help clean up the city finances? Trying to reduce corruption? So those are some of the so what question. The success metrics come around, could be around, citizen learning and empowerment. It could also be sort of if resources are begin to be allocated in different ways. So, for example, it may be that if Paris is spending so much money, what were the goals of their organization? Was it making the city better for tourists? Was it for residents? Was it for school children? And then trying to sort of follow that through. So one of the reasons that we're using this metric of infant mortality is because infant mortality is really of poor and low-income women to health care. And it really demonstrates how it responds and begins to think about access for a particular groups of women and families in the medical system. So that was a way to show, were they reaching their goals of this inversion of priorities of trying to allocate money into communities that historically been underserved. I think it really comes down to sort of the so what question.
Thank you. Process question about how you set up an effective participatory budgeting exist everywhere, but particularly in a city and a county, state government, and school district, all of which are providing different in a PB process. Don't understand those. I'd love to say that 6 governments, but I know that's experience. How do you deal with that for and the community members who are participating?
Yeah, that is the question, and I also want to say that I had conversations already about how you negotiate multiple scales of government and jurisdiction. You know, the city of Seattle has not tackled that. For your Voice Your Choice, we work with 2 departments, Seattle Parks and Recreation, Seattle Department of Transportation. I wish I could say that it was easy. You'd think so. Departments, it's complicated. County is trying to start a participatory budgeting program. Some walls. So there's 2 parts. External. So externally, as you can imagine, when we're out in ideas and doing projects, up quite often. You know, bus shelters. Well, technically, that's actually falls outside of us, so that doesn't work. A lot too many ideas. But rather than seeing it as a no, it's actually scales of government. So and you don't handle the metro? No, we handle the streets, right? And that's a part of the that emerge when you have, and then take the what advice in terms of process. What I would say is relationships. You definitely need strong relationships with work. It won't work if you don't have strong relationships. And a part of that too is a lot of it is going to be time. Who is in power, who is in their jobs, in that continuity. And clear delineation of roles and a clear communication and goals. So, you know, we know you can sit down and map out all of the barriers that exist. And as you're doing your program design, put those barriers in the forefront. And I say this a lot, I say it's not to say have low expectations, but have reasonable expectations. Draw a smaller box, do that box really well, execute to the full point, then use that data and expand. But off the bat, that's setting yourself up to fail, and it's defeating. It's defeating for your staff, it's defeating. It's about calling where you can wins.
Thank you, Amy. All right, so we've got about a minute and a half left. So I just want to get quick 2 more questions, and we'll just try to stay in this minute and a half time frame we got. No pressure.
All right, is this okay?
Our group was wondering how is competition mediated between communities over funds and how do you maintain participation in the face of that? Like you mentioned in Seattle, how you have different priorities for different communities, but how do you maintain engagement across communities?
What I'd say is that we have to continue to do better on that. Strategies changed by tapping community trusted partners and folks that can mobilize people. I think first and foremost is a government entity with limitations that we need to have the folks that are actually doing the work as. So what that means is putting a lot of power on nonprofits, service providers, and to drive that work and then driving strategy while supporting them also. But the research wars, and especially happen across neighborhoods. And what we do in our development, which are the 2-hour meetings, is we actually have criteria that center on and also the environment. We actually make people look at those maps, look at collision data, and actually think about when you're evaluating who is being affected by this project. So what are the cultural institutions around there? What communities are there? And ask them to score and evaluate the projects based off of a criteria equity. Now, does that work all the time? Discretion, but we set up the conversation to put that as a set criteria.
Considering how to introduce participation, and given that the city already collected facts that's dedicated to the high school students, it seems possible that the youth could just do the participatory to spend some of that arts tax revenue, and that because all the adults in the room are contributing that money, they would also be watching the process and learning. And part of the intention of the participatory budgeting is to increase civic education. So it seems like it would meet those goals. What would be the appropriate way to introduce participatory budgeting to the Portland Public Schools?
That sounds like an awesome idea. I think it's a great way to go through way to reach young people. Just your commission because they are the ones who know the kind of the best access, like at what time of day in which students come up with student leaders. You could have and the city of
I would also say focus up like a great that aren't being like historically served. So understanding if I'm not sure how, but listen to, it's important to get those voices instead of hearing from the ones that have already been heard. So that's key in kind of communication in the Portland Public School District.
Our panelists here, thank you everybody. Good stuff. Also here for you, those amazing questions. We're all here for the same purpose. I want to hear a round of applause for you guys too, because you've been incredible. Good questions. I'm going to pass the mic over here to my colleague Nick here, and we've got some fun, exciting activities going on. Nicholas Hash, everybody.
Great seeing everyone here today. Like you said, my name is the privilege of helping this wonderful cohort of people bring you all here today. So I just want to let you know how privileged I feel to see all your faces here. Today, we're going to let you, guess what, participate in participatory budgeting. Crazy. So over the next hour, we're just going to have you weigh in through, we have a couple different ways you can do it. We have a link. If you registered for this conference, this link in it, oops. And basically weigh in on how you're feeling far. There is a couple questions. There's a couple questions that have is your highest ranking. So, and everything. You can use a smartphone, you can use a computer, and then we also have paper access to those things. So I just wanted to bring that up. That over the next hour throughout our next conversation. next round of conversations. So we're basically after lunch, but this time or who your mediator is. There is also, if you're not feeling any stuff, we're looking at like PB design and outreach, transfer spaces, schools, bringing PB to the Portland region, card that I mentioned. So hopefully we can get a little bit deeper into some of those really and I believe I'm going to take a 10-minute break after this. So without any further ado, a round of applause for me because the human capital in here is blowing me away.
At the end of the next phase, we're going to facilitators will pass out. Oh, the facilitators. Go to a table you would like to facilitate now to facilitate.
This is an ad for a project management tool called Monday.com. This is what it looks like, and this is what it feels like.
How to add their URL in the path right here. One thing I have to mention is in the and simply plugin and simply by entering their URL in the path right here. One thing I have to mention is first of all, Twitch TV doesn't allow this. Does not allow this, and it's a bit most cases Nginx red. You might be able to choose example express over my locals. In this case, I should actually see my video again because I'm recording this tutorial and at the same time just sending it to my Nginx server, so I can grab it right away for this test to showcase how simple it is to add an RTMP stream if it's allowed by its server. Yeah, as mentioned, you can pretty much add any kind of RTMP stream that allows it. So this means, for example, if you have a friend that plays the same game as you, which has the option to run an Nginx server, for example, which just needs a Windows system or a little Linux virtual machine, for example. He could simply stream his own footage to this server. You grab it off the server and add his stream as a little picture-in-picture, for example. And pretty much anything you want to do can be done with this little plugin and the correct URL. So I hope you have fun doing some picture-in-picture stuff soon, and I'm eager to see your streams. See you soon for the next tutorial, and don't forget to subscribe.
Hi, I'm Elliot Miller, and welcome to this video tutorial from the cast. In this video, we'll be explaining how to use the encoder OBS with our service. Open Broadcaster software is a very powerful tool. It's free to download and has a wonderful community that drives it forward. However, as a community-driven, free, open software, it is not as user-friendly as some of the paid services out there. I bring this up because as part of this tutorial, to make OBS work with the cast, we're going to have to go into some files and edit them. It's nothing complicated.
This is a short tutorial how to live stream with your Sony. Okay. Save changes. It's just click UDP thing. So you can hit the open up network stream or Control N. Call in the stream. And then click here on your symbol. Then go to Creator Studio.
Hate to interrupt the conversations, but if you
go
could
to
kind
Video
of move
Manager.
towards doing your evaluations, we'll give you 5 more minutes to do that. And also, if you have any paper ballots for the voting, bring them up to me.
This is here. It only says program, not program files. That's just fine. Click on program. Click on did it. Okay. And you need to type in UDP : // p. Click OK. Click add. And right at the bottom it says video.
It's 3 o'clock.